My stepmother thought she'd taken everything the day my father died, leaving me with a military uniform, a broken heart, and zero inheritance. But 3 hours after the funeral, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. It was my father's billionaire boss, his voice barely a whisper. "I found something your father hid in my vault before he died. Come to my estate alone tonight. Don't tell your stepmother. You could be in grave danger." Everyone in town believed my dad was just a quiet mechanic, but when I walked into that mansion and saw who was sitting behind the mahogany desk, holding a black leather journal with my name on it, I froze. Welcome to my story. Please stay with me until the very end and comment the city or country you're watching from so I can see how far my voice has reached. My name is Eleanor Whitaker. I'm 31 years old and a captain in the United States Army. I've led soldiers through high-stress operations, but nothing prepared me for the cold hostility waiting for me back home in Sacramento. Standing beside my father's grave in my dress uniform, the rain soaked through my coat, matching the chill in my heart. Beside me stood my stepmother, Brenda. She didn't shed a single tear. Instead, her eyes darted toward the luxury cars parked near the cemetery gate, already calculating the cash value of my father's life. For 20 years, everyone knew my dad, Thomas Whitaker, as a hard-working, quiet head mechanic for Sterling Enterprises. He lived modestly, fixed up old trucks, and always told me that honor was the only thing a person truly owned. When he passed away after a sudden illness, Brenda immediately claimed there was no money left. She took the house, liquidated his small savings account, and handed me a box of his old tools, telling me a soldier didn't need a civilian inheritance. I accepted it quietly, preferring peace over an ugly battle. That was until 3 hours after the burial. I was sitting in my rental car outside my dad's favorite diner when my phone buzzed. An unlisted number. When I answered, a voice I recognized instantly filled the line. Richard Sterling, the secretive billionaire owner of Sterling Enterprises. "Captain Whitaker," he whispered, his tone sharp and urgent. "I'm calling from my private line. Your father left something in my vault weeks before he died. You need to come to my estate immediately. Come alone, Eleanor. And whatever you do, do not tell your stepmother. You could be in serious danger." The drive to the Sterling estate felt like a covert nighttime operation. Rain lashed against my windshield as I navigated the winding roads leading up into the Sacramento hills, my mind racing with questions. In the military, you learn to trust your instincts, and right now every internal alarm was ringing. My father had been a simple head mechanic, or so I had believed my entire life. Why would a billionaire like Richard Sterling have a private vault item intended for a mechanic's daughter? And why would seeing him put me in danger from my own stepmother? Passing through the massive wrought iron gates of the estate, 2 armed security guards checked my military ID before waving me down the long, tree-lined driveway. The mansion loomed ahead like a fortress carved out of limestone and glass. A butler silently escorted me through marble hallways into a dimly lit, wood-paneled study that smelled of old leather and tobacco. Sitting behind a massive mahogany desk was Richard Sterling. He looked exhausted, his sharp blue eyes heavy with a mixture of grief and anxiety. He didn't offer a polite greeting. Instead, he stood up, locked the thick oak door behind me, and turned around. "Captain Whitaker," Richard said, his voice low and deliberate. "What you knew about your father was only half the truth. Thomas wasn't just my head mechanic. He was my closest friend, my most trusted advisor, and the man who held the master patents for Sterling Enterprises' commercial engines." I stared at him, stunned. My father was an inventor? "He was a genius who preferred the grease of a workshop to the corporate spotlight," Richard said, leaning against the desk. "He made millions off those patents, Eleanor. But 6 months ago, when his health began to fail, he realized your stepmother Brenda and her son were plotting something terrible." Richard reached under the desk, pulled out a heavy steel security box, and set it on the mahogany surface with a dull thud. He left this in my vault with explicit orders. Only you can open it. And only after he was gone. I looked down at the steel box resting on the dark mahogany desk, my pulse hammering against my ribs. In the military, you learn to read a room in seconds, and right now, Richard Sterling's eyes contained pure, unvarnished truth. My father hadn't been a forgotten mechanic dying in poverty. He had been a mastermind hiding in plain sight. "How do I open it?" I asked, stepping closer to the desk, my hands hovering over the reinforced cold steel. Richard reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black velvet cloth, unfolding it to reveal a mechanical keyway built into the side of the box. "Your dad said you'd know what to use. He told me the key never left your side." My hand instinctively moved to my neck. Beneath my army uniform, hanging right alongside my official military dog tags, was a small silver brass key my father had given me on the day I graduated from West Point. He'd told me it was a lucky charm, something to remind me of home. All these years, I'd worn it without ever questioning what lock it belonged to. With trembling fingers, I unclasped the chain, inserted the key into the custom keyway, and turned it. A sharp metal click echoed through the quiet study. The lid sprang open. Inside lay 3 items: a leather-bound journal, an encrypted metal flash drive, and a thick legal deed stamped with an official state seal. I picked up the deed first. As I scanned the legal jargon, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just a property document. It was a corporate registry proving that my father held a 15% silent equity stake in Sterling Enterprises, a stake worth millions, registered exclusively under my birth name, Eleanor Whitaker. Below the deed lay bank ledgers detailing how Brenda and her son had spent months secretly draining my father's personal accounts, transferring his money into offshore holdings while trying to trick him into signing over his patent rights on his deathbed. He hadn't died broke at all. He had outmaneuvered them, protecting his true legacy for me, while letting Brenda believe she had won a worthless house. I picked up the leather-bound journal, flipping through pages filled with my father's meticulous handwriting. Every entry was a timeline of betrayal. He had recorded dates, conversations, and phone calls documenting how Brenda and her son had tried to isolate him during his final months, attempting to manipulate his medical power of attorney. Richard pressed a button on his desk, and a recorded audio file began playing over the room's speakers. My father's frail, raspy voice filled the room, recorded just weeks before his passing. "Eleanor," his voice echoed, sending a shiver down my spine. "If you're hearing this, I'm already gone. I know Brenda thinks she's stripped me clean, but honor always triumphs over greed. She tried to make me sign away my life's work while I was weak, but I held out for you. Everything I built belongs to my daughter. Use the truth, Captain. Show them what happens when you cross a Whitaker." Hearing his voice again brought tears to my eyes, but as an Army officer, my tactical training immediately took over. Grief surrendered to pure, cold focus. Emotional outbursts wouldn't fix this. A calculated strategy would. Brenda thought she had already won, securing the modest family house and my father's small savings. She had no idea that the real empire was sitting right here in front of me. "We don't just file a lawsuit," I said, looking up at Richard with military precision. "If we hit them with a surprise legal attack, her lawyers will try to stall and hide the embezzled funds. We need to catch them completely off guard." Richard smiled, a sharp, cold expression. "I agree. Tomorrow morning, I'm hosting an official corporate estate reading at Sterling headquarters. I told Brenda she's coming to collect a final corporate buyout check for your father's tools. She thinks she's walking away with $100,000. "Let her think that," I replied, closing the journal. "She has no idea who's really waiting for her." The morning sun hit the glass towers of Sterling corporate headquarters, casting sharp, cold shadows across the stone plaza. Inside the top-floor executive boardroom, Brenda and her son, Justin, sat at a polished conference table, dressed in high-end designer clothes they clearly couldn't afford. They moved with an obnoxious air of triumph, practically buzzing with excitement as they waited to collect what they believed was a massive final corporate buyout check. Brenda adjusted her pearl necklace, checking her watch with an impatient smirk. "I hope Richard Sterling doesn't keep us waiting long," she whispered loudly to Justin. "We have reservations at the club at noon, and I want this settled today." "Don't worry, Mom," Justin replied, leaning back and resting his leather shoes on the edge of a chair. "The old man's gone, and Eleanor is probably halfway back to her military base with her box of rusty tools. There's nobody left to stop us." The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open. But it wasn't just Richard Sterling who walked in. I stepped into the room first, wearing my crisp, dark blue Army service uniform, complete with captain rank insignia and service ribbons. My polished boots clicked loudly against the hardwood floor with absolute authority. Behind me walked Richard Sterling, flanked by 2 corporate attorneys and a detective from the Financial Crimes Division. Brenda's jaw dropped. The smug smile vanished from her face instantly, replaced by a flash of sheer shock. "Eleanor?" she stammered, scrambling to stand up. "What are you doing here? You don't belong in a corporate meeting." "I belong anywhere my father's legacy is involved, Brenda," I said, taking a seat directly across from her. Richard set a thick stack of forensic audit reports on the table. "Brenda, you aren't here to receive a payout. You're here to answer for systemic fraud." The room went dead quiet as the detective stepped forward, placing a police binder onto the table alongside the forensic audit. Justin jumped to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is insane! You can't accuse us of anything. My father left everything to my mother." "Your father didn't leave you a single dime, Justin," I said, my voice steady, cold and razor-sharp. "And he wasn't your father. He was the man whose life you tried to ruin while he was fighting for his breath." Richard opened the master trust folder and pushed the genuine, legally binding documents across the table. Thomas Whitaker's real, updated will and testament leaves his entire estate, including his silent equity stake in Sterling Enterprises, valued at over $12 million. Exclusively to his daughter, Captain Eleanor Whitaker. Brenda's face drained of all color. "That's a fake. We signed the papers at the hospital." "You signed papers you forged while my dad was heavily medicated," I replied, leaning forward and looking her dead in the eye. "We have the medical records, the forensic handwriting analysis, and the full bank statements showing the offshore accounts where you transferred his stolen savings. Every single dollar you took is documented." The detective pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Brenda Miller, Justin Miller, you are under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and forgery. You have the right to remain silent." Justin slumped back into his chair, completely speechless, while Brenda began to sob hysterically, realizing that her greedy scheme had completely collapsed. They weren't walking out with a fortune. They were walking out in handcuffs. As the officers escorted them out of the building, I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows toward the Sacramento sky. Using the millions my father left behind, I immediately established the Thomas Whitaker Veteran Support Foundation to help military families in need. Justice was served, his legacy was restored, and my father's honor remained untouched. Standing on the quiet cliffs of Carmel, watching the sunset cast golden light over the ocean, I finally felt at peace. For months, I believed my father had died with nothing, leaving me with only a uniform and grief. But standing up against greed taught me that real legacy isn't measured in quick cash. It's forged through honor, patience, and absolute courage. Brenda and Justin thought they could exploit a soldier's absence and a dying man's silence. But they underestimated the power of truth and the lengths a loving father would go to protect his child. My father built an empire without ever compromising his integrity, and through the Thomas Whitaker Veteran Support Foundation, his hard work now provides shelter, education, and hope to hundreds of military families every single year. His name stands for honor, and that is something no amount of money could ever buy. Now, I want to ask you, if you were in my shoes, standing in that boardroom with all the evidence in your hands, would you have pushed for criminal charges, or would you have walked away once your legacy was secure? Comment your thoughts below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another video. Right now, on your screen, you'll see 2 other channel favorites that I know will shock and surprise you. Click on one to keep watching, and thank you so much for listening to my story today.